My topic for today is cerebrovascular disease, decision making, including medical therapy. Cerebrovascular disease. Let's have a brief recap from the previous presentations. Cerebrovascular disease can manifest as stroke or transient ischemic attacks. Now, stroke is defined as acute neurological dysfunction of vascular etiology lasting for greater than 24 hours and resulting from focal cerebral infarction. Ischemic stroke due to carotid artery disease can present as contralateral sensory motor loss, speech deficit, or ipsilateral monoocular blindness. TIA or mini stroke, it's defined as a neurological event presenting with stroke-like symptoms but lasting for less than 24 hours in duration. It's a warning sign of future stroke, with 30% patients developing stroke within the next 5 years. It also manifests like stroke, with amaurosis fugax or transient monoocular blindness being the classical symptom of TIA of carotid artery origin. Coming to the etiology of stroke, 80 to 87% of stroke are from ischemic origin, and 13 to 20% of the strokes are due to hemorrhage. Approximately 20% of ischemic strokes are due to extracranial carotid stenosis. There is an increased risk of recurrent stroke in these patients. Now let us look at the risk factors for recurrent stroke. These are patient-specific characters and plague-specific characters. In patient-specific characters, first is prior neurological symptoms. Any history of recent within 6 months ipsilateral neurological symptoms, this is the most important risk factor for recurrent stroke. And any prior neurological symptoms, either ipsilateral or contralateral, also increase the risk for recurrent stroke. Stroke risk is highest within the first month after an initial neurological event and then declines to the normal asymptomatic lesion by around 6 months. Presence of contralateral carotid occlusion. Patients with contralateral carotid occlusion and impaired collateral circulation are at an increased risk of late stroke, whereas patients with contralateral carotid occlusion with relatively normal intracranial hemodynamics have a lower risk of late stroke. Clinically silent emboli. These are identified by CT or MRI or transcranial Doppler imaging. Presence of clinically silent infarcts are associated with an increased risk of subsequent ipsilateral symptoms. Now, coming to the plaque characteristics which are at risk for stroke, degree of stenosis. Degree of stenosis is directly related to the stroke risk in both symptomatic and asymptomatic patients. Diameter of stenosis is a surrogate marker of plaque size or volume. Greater the stenosis indicates larger volume size, which means the plaque is unstable with larger lipid core and thin fibrous cap. Plaque progression. Plaque size progression is also associated with increased risk of subsequent stroke. Plaque character. Features of vulnerable plaque which are associated with an increased risk of stroke are plaque heterogeneity with increased echolucency, surface irregularity as manifested by ulcerations and angiography, thin or disrupted fibrous cap with adjacent echolucent plaque area, increased inflammatory infiltrate on MRI or PET scan, and discrete white areas within the plaque. This is an image showing echolucent plaque formation and intraplaque hemorrhage. Coming to the decision making regarding cerebrovascular disease. Before going to decision making, let us have a look at the burden of stroke in India. In this article, according to this article, the prevalence of stroke in India is 84 to 260 per 1 lakh in rural areas and 334 to 424 in urban areas. The incidence is around 119 to 145 per 1 lakh population. This article also gives a similar picture of incidence being 105 to 152 per 1 lakh persons per year. This translates to around 13 to 20 lakh new stroke cases every year. Out of this, 1.5 to 4 lakhs are due to extracranial carotid artery disease. Coming to the guidelines, many societies across the world have formulated guidelines for decision making in cerebrovascular disease. The common recommendation of all these guidelines are in patients with symptomatic patients with angiographic stenosis less than 50%, ideal treatment is best medical management. In symptomatic patients with stenosis greater than 50 to 99%, ideal treatment is carotid intervention. With regard to carotid intervention, in normal risk patients, endarterectomy is preferred over angioplasty and stenting. In high risk patients with uncompensated cardiac disease or hostile neck, angioplasty and stenting is preferred over endarterectomy. For asymptomatic patients with stenosis less than 60%, ideal management is best medical treatment. With stenosis greater than 60 to 99%, ideal treatment is carotid intervention. In normal risk patients, carotid endarterectomy with best medical management is recommended if combined perioperative stroke and death complication rate is less than 3%. For high-risk patients, best medical management alone is recommended. Coming to the timing of intervention, in patients with severe transient ischemic attack, preferred time of intervention is within 2 weeks. This is because there is increased risk of recurrent stroke within the first 2 to 6 weeks. Unless there are contraindications, early intervention is preferred in patients presenting with mild to moderate neurological deficits as per NIH stroke scale and no evidence of cerebral hemorrhage with less than 30% hemisphere involvement. Contraindications to any intervention are chronic total occlusion of the ICA and severe disabling stroke. Now let us see the difference among these guidelines. The difference are mainly with respect to the carotid angioplasty and stenting. In symptomatic patients, American Heart Association and European European Cardiology Society supports the role of angioplasty and stenting as an alternative to endarterectomy in normal risk patients, whereas SVS recommends angioplasty and stenting as an alternative to endarterectomy only in high-risk patients. In asymptomatic patients, AHA and ECS supports the role of angioplasty and stenting in patients with stenosis greater than 60%, whereas SVS do not support angioplasty and stenting in asymptomatic patients, except in centers with stroke and death rate less than 3%. Let us look at the evidence based on which these recommendations are made. These are the trials which compared best medical management alone versus medical management with endarterectomy. Asymptomatic carotid surgery trial 1. In this study, around 3,100 patients, asymptomatic patients with stenosis greater than 60% were studied, and the results are at 5-year follow-up, stroke and death rates were significantly lower in endarterectomy and medical management group compared to medical management alone. In this asymptomatic carotid atherosclerosis study, around 1,600 asymptomatic patients with greater than 60% were studied, and the results are at 5 years follow-up are stroke and death rates were significantly lower in endarterectomy and BMT group compared to best medical management alone. These are the studies about symptomatic patients. In NASET study, around 1,400 symptomatic patients with 659 patients having high-grade stenosis, 70 to 99%, and 865 patients with moderate stenosis were studied, and the results are in patients with high-grade carotid stenosis, endarterectomy is highly beneficial, whereas in patients with stenosis less than 70%, endarterectomy was moderately beneficial. In this European carotid surgery trial, around 2,200 symptomatic patients were included, and the results are endarterectomy is beneficial in symptomatic patients with carotid stenosis. This is the table summarizing all the previously mentioned studies, which unanimously concluded that endarterectomy is beneficial for symptomatic patients with greater than 50% stenosis and in asymptomatic patients with greater than 60% stenosis. These are the trials comparing endarterectomy versus angioplasty and stenting. In CREST trial, carotid revascularization endarterectomy versus stenting trial, around 2,500 normal risk patients, both symptomatic and asymptomatic, were included. And the results are stroke was more likely after angioplasty and stenting, whereas cardiac events like MI were more likely after endarterectomy. Younger patients have fewer adverse effects after angioplasty and stenting, and older patients, endarterectomy was more favorable. Late stroke or death was favorable in the endarterectomy group. In asymptomatic carotid trial 1, around 1,450 normal risk asymptomatic patients were included, and this study showed stenting was non-inferior to endarterectomy, and there is no difference between endarterectomy and angioplasty stenting or perioperative stroke or death. Cumulative 5-year stroke-free survival was almost equal in both the groups. These meta-analyses comparing endarterectomy and stenting showed that endarterectomy has a favorable outcome with respect to recurrent strokes, whereas angioplasty and stenting has favorable with cardiovascular events, and there is no significant difference with respect to death. Coming to factors influencing the decision to recommend intervention. First, life expectancy. Symptomatic patients with high-grade stenosis can be considered for intervention even when their life expectancy is only 2 to 3 years, whereas asymptomatic patients should survive at least 3 to 5 years to derive benefit from the procedure. Age. Multiple reports indicate that older patients are at significantly higher risk of stroke after angioplasty and stenting. So at present, angioplasty and stenting cannot be recommended for patients, asymptomatic patients greater than 70 years of age. Gender. Several studies have showed that angioplasty and stenting are associated with complications than endarterectomy in women. This is one study published in Journal of Vascular Surgery which showed in symptomatic women, angioplasty and stenting was associated with 3 to 4-fold more death or stroke rate compared to endarterectomy, whereas in asymptomatic women, the differences was less pronounced. Functional status. Patients having dense hemisphere neurological deficits have no benefit from the intervention, and there is limited role of intervention in patients having dementia and limitation in functional ability. Cardiac status. Endarterectomy is associated with an increased risk of overall cardiac events compared to stenting, and predictors of adverse cardiac events in these patients are uncompensated congestive cardiac failure and untreated CAD. Coming to the workup, in symptomatic patients with 70 to 99% stenosis, clinical risk assessment alone is enough, whereas stress testing is reserved for patients having a history of active angina, new onset ECG changes, or new onset congestive cardiac failure, whereas extensive cardiac workup is needed in asymptomatic patients. Regional anesthesia is preferred for CAA patients with a significant cardiac history. Pulmonary status. Pulmonary disease per se does not have a major role in morbidity after carotid intervention, whereas renal insufficiency is associated with reduced life expectancy, increased complication rates after both endarterectomy and stenting, and increased incidence of cerebrovascular events. It itself is an independent risk factor for subsequent stroke. Presence of contralateral carotid occlusion. Any symptomatic patient with contralateral carotid occlusion should undergo intervention. Asymptomatic patients with contralateral occlusion, it's a matter of dispute and there is no enough evidence at present to support any intervention. And with regard to intervention in symptomatic patients, even though there is a small but statistically significantly increased risk of stroke after endarterectomy, it is still within the American Heart Association guidelines and did not statistically favor stenting over endarterectomy. Now, factors influencing the choice of intervention. Hostile neck. Presence of prior irradiation, stoma, or prior surgery with local changes relatively increase the risk of endarterectomy, especially with regard to increased cranial nerve injuries and wound complications. But however, excellent results have been noted with endarterectomy in patients with hostile neck. Lesions outside the area of cervical carotid artery. Lesions below the clavicle or above the level of second cervical vertebra pose significant difficulties. These require additional exposure with increased risk of cranial nerve injuries after endarterectomy. And tandem lesions are associated with the risk of stroke after angioplasty and stenting. Vessel tortuosity. Tortuous aortic arch, atheroma in the aortic arch, tortuous proximal carotid vessels, and tortuous distal internal carotid artery are all associated with increased complication risk of angioplasty and stenting. And the role of transcervical angioplasty is in relation to the endarterectomy remains to be defined. Lesion character. Vulnerable plaque increases embolization risk after angioplasty and stenting than endarterectomy, and lesions greater than 1.5 centimeter in length, pre-occlusive lesions, highly calcified lesions, and lesions containing fresh thrombus are associated with worse outcomes after angioplasty and stenting. Unstable neurological syndromes. Patients having crescendo TAA or stroke in evaluation should be stabilized first and prepared for endarterectomy. There is no role of angioplasty and stenting in these patients. These patients are the reason for this unstable neurological syndromes are highly unstable plaque and compromised intracranial circulation with the increased risk of postoperative stroke and death. Patients with the recurrent carotid stenosis. Incidence of recurrent carotid stenosis after endarterectomy and angioplasty stenting is around 8 to 2%. Patients with early recurrent stenosis, that is presenting within 24 months, main reason is because of intimal hyperplasia, and these patients usually have a relatively benign course. Whereas late recurrent stenosis, patients presenting after 36 months are mainly due to recurrent atherosclerotic disease and are more likely to be associated with new neurological symptoms. Coming to the choice of intervention, in patients with recurrent carotid stenosis after endarterectomy, angioplasty and stenting is preferred, but still, in patients with recurrent stenosis, endarterectomy Recurrent stenosis is not an absolute contraindication for endarterectomy. In radiation-induced stenosis, there is no difference between angioplasty and stenting or endarterectomy in terms of stroke risk, whereas higher risk of cranial injury is associated with endarterectomy and higher risk of restenosis is associated with angioplasty and stenting. Coming to the second part of the discussion, medical management. Best medical management is indicated for patients with symptomatic patients with stenosis less than 50%, asymptomatic patients with stenosis less than 60%, and patients satisfying criteria to intervene but are at high risk for both endarterectomy and stenting. Control of hypertension. As per the guidelines, any stroke patients without previous history of hypertension should be started on antihypertensive therapy if the BP is greater than 140/190. And patients with whose BP is less than 140/190, there is no significant benefit of starting antihypertensive therapy. For patients who are already taking antihypertensives, should continue the treatment. The target for therapy is BP less than 140/90. For patients with recent lacunar stroke, it might be reasonable to target a systolic blood pressure less than 130 mmHg. Control of diabetes. Diabetes itself is an independent predictor of recurrent stroke with an incidence of 9%. The target HbA1c should be less than 7%. ACCORD and advanced trials showed there is no benefit from strict glucose control and maintaining HbA1c less than 6% when compared to the recommended level of less than 7%. Control of dyslipidemia. Elevated cholesterol is associated with increased risk of stroke. Statins exert both lipid lowering and anti-inflammatory effect and reduces the risk of subsequent neurological events. The target for treatment is reduce LDL by 50% or less than 70 mg per deciliter. There is no compelling data on the use of statins in stroke patients with a normal lipid profile and with no cardiovascular risk factors. Behavioral modification. Total abstinence from smoking should be advised and avoid excessive alcohol consumption. Physical activity to be encouraged. There is no data supporting relationship between obesity and stroke risk at present. Metabolic syndrome. Presence of any three of the following 5 factors constitute metabolic syndrome. They are increased waist circumference greater than 102 centimeters for men, greater than 82 centimeters for females, triglycerides greater than 150 mg per deciliter, HDL less than 50 for men and less than 40 for men, fasting blood glucose greater than 100 mg per deciliter, and systolic blood pressure greater than 135, and diastolic blood pressure greater than 85 millimeters mercury. All these are associated with an increased stroke risk. And coming to the antiplatelet therapy for these patients, according to the present available data, either single or dual antiplatelet therapy is acceptable. It reduces both stroke rate and overall major adverse cardiac events. Whereas in patients planned for angioplasty and stenting, who are usually high-risk patients, dual antiplatelet therapy is advised. And resistance to antiplatelet agents clearly exists, and failure of therapy should prompt a change in agents or test for drug resistance. Now, coming to the individual antiplatelet drugs, aspirin is recommended at a dose of 81 to 325 mg per day, and it is non-enteric preparation, as enteric coated aspirins are associated to have aspirin resistance. Clopidogrel 75 mg per deciliter is advised. Ticlopidine, which was having good efficacy but has been recently withdrawn because of adverse effects like neutropenia and thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. Newer drugs like Prasurgel may have a role, especially in patients with drug resistance. These are the studies according to which the recommendations on antiplatelet therapy has been made. The European Stroke Prevention Study 1 and 2 showed that combination therapy with aspirin and dipyridamole has more superior effect when compared to single drug usage. Whereas PROFESS study showed there is no benefit from the combination of aspirin and dipyridamole over clopidogrel alone. Capri's study showed clopidogrel was compared with aspirin and demonstrated an overall cardiovascular event rate of 5.32 in the clopidogrel group versus 5.83 in the aspirin group, which is not much significant. Match trial also compared clopidogrel alone with clopidogrel plus aspirin and showed there is no incremental benefit of dual antiplatelet therapy. Charishma trial also showed there is no difference between monotherapy with aspirin alone and dual therapy. coming to the upcoming things in this topic, in the 2017, ESVS has come up with the latest guidelines for management of atherosclerotic, carotid, and vertebral artery disease. According any patients with recent less than 6 months symptoms of stroke or TIA, best medical therapy is advised for patients in asymptomatic patients with carotid stenosis less than 60% and symptomatic patients with near total occlusion or occlusion and symptomatic patients with stenosis less than 50%. In asymptomatic patients with stenosis 60 to 99% and with life expectancy greater than 5 years, favorable anatomy, and greater than one feature suggesting higher stroke risk and BMT, they are advised either endarterectomy or angioplasty and stenting along with best medical treatment. In symptomatic patients with carotid artery stenosis 50 to 69%, endarterectomy with the best medical treatment should be considered. And carotid in symptomatic patients with carotid artery stenosis 70 to 99%, endarterectomy with best medical management is recommended. It's class 1A evidence. And angioplasty and stenting should be considered only for high-risk patients for endarterectomy. And other upcoming trials are asymptomatic carotid surgery trial 2. This is an ongoing RCT comparing endarterectomy with angioplasty in patients with asymptomatic carotid stenosis, and results to be obtained in this year. And another CREST-2 carotid revascularization and medical management for asymptomatic carotid stenosis trial. It's an ongoing RCT comparing study of carotid revascularization and intensive medical management versus medical management alone in patients with asymptomatic high-grade carotid stenosis. Estimated completion date is December 2022. And with regard to guidelines from SVS, carotid artery and cerebrovascular disease are yet to come. And India has started National Stroke Registration Program for Surveillance in the year 2020. Thank you.